Welcome to the video series Inspiring Better Banking, Future of Banking, hosted by me. My name is Raktim Singh. I have done my BTech from IIT BHU and I am working as a senior product leader in Infosys Finacle from 1995. In this video series, we'll be talking with the industry experts, taking their views on the financial world, banking, fintech, which are the trends which are emerging, things which banks have to do to stay relevant and stay ahead of the curve. So join me for those thought-provoking sessions with the industry experts. Thank you. Today with me, Tony is there. Tony is expert on digital transformation, various technologies related to fintech, a top voice in fintech, and co-founder of Digital Transformation Lab. So thank you, Tony, for joining us. For our audience, if you can introduce yourself, Tony, that will be helpful.
Thank you, Raktim. Yes, Tony Moroney. I live in Dublin, Ireland, but I have worked all over the world. I have a long career, I suppose, in industry, consulting and academia. So I originally started my career working in financial services, so I have a good understanding of how financial services work. I've been consulting for the last 15 years on an international basis, and I'm also involved in academia where I run a number of programs around digital leadership, digital transformation, cyber leadership, and generative AI. And then with the think tank, of course, we get to talk to really interesting people like yourself, Raktim, who have written books, and we explore the whole world of disruption. So it's a really interesting career that I have had.
Thank you, Tony. So, Tony, now 2023 is coming to the end, and next year, 2024. So, what do you feel will be the technological trend, especially for the banks and fintech, because they have to be at the edge of technology to move ahead. So what do you feel will be the trend for 2024?
Well, look, I think the first thing is we need to put it in context in terms of the environment in which banking and fintech is operating. It is challenging. We got geopolitical risks, we got higher interest rates than we've had before, which on one level brings bonanza, and another level brings challenges around affordability and debt serviceability, etc. But we also have pressures on the sector in terms of sustainability, not just in terms of what they're doing themselves, but also how they're working with their customers to help their customers to be sustainable. So it is a challenging environment, and that's before we get to the changes that consumers are demanding, or how new competition is putting pressure on banks, and even before we start to talk about legacy technology and the challenges that brings. I also think, Raktim, that we're probably in a post-COVID environment where customers all over the world now realize you don't need to go into a bank branch to get something done, and that has changed the perception of your customers, but also employees. Employees are looking to do things differently as well, and what it has meant is that there are new ways of doing things, and there are new business models which COVID has undoubtedly has accelerated, and it has also changed in terms of, actually, do you need a bank or do you just need a provider? So I think there's a whole host of challenges there. In terms of technology, look, banks are focused on the usual stuff, robotics, how to automate stuff, how to get your processes, automated end to end. They're also trying to figure out their way around the cloud, because if you want to develop fast and have a faster cadence in market, you can't do it all in-house. You need to figure out, where does cloud enable and support your business? And there's all sort of questions going on in the minds of banks in terms of privacy and everything else. But I think we're heading towards a hybrid model. I think we'll see further investment in artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is not new. It might be in vogue, but it's not new. It's been, artificial intelligence has been around for longer than us. But banks are focused on things like biometrics in terms of how to get the security right, all those type of things. But the big one that they're all trying to get their mind around is generative AI, because it clearly has potential. It also has risks. So I see, as we go into 2024, the big challenge remains for banks is around what problem are we trying to solve, and how does technology support us? Now, I'm not sure that's the way banks across the board look at it. I think a lot of them tend to look at it, well, let's look at the technology as opposed to what problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah. So thanks, Tony. And I think you have touched upon on very important thing, be it the interest rate. I think in one country we are seeing interest rates are going up, and some part of the world interest rates are going down. Difficult geopolitical situation, which is again having a stress on our logistic issues on supply chain. And I think we came out from the burning platform of COVID, which forced many of us to move to the cloud, but not sure whether everybody has really utilized the cloud. And now Gen AI. So because I was reading one article yesterday that many banks have moved to the cloud, but really have they got the benefit of the cloud or really able to harness the power of cloud? There is still some ways away. And now Gen AI. So how do you see the Gen AI evolving? You touched upon that. If you can elaborate further on that, what banks should be looking for Gen AI and AI as well as the Gen AI, I will say.
Yeah, well, look, as I've said, banks already use artificial intelligence. Look, I think we have to recognize that, financial services is a heavily regulated sector. And you can't afford to get things wrong. So you have to get them right. I mean, I was reading about one bank somewhere in the world that was using generative AI to answer customer queries, and they were saying they had something like a 90% success rate. And I was kind of thinking, well, actually, most regulators would not be very happy with that. So I think these are just tools, and we need to remember they are nothing but tools. And if they can help us do something well for our customers, great. But we need to make sure that that we're using them in a responsible way and in an ethical way. Now, I think where the big challenge with generative AI is in the following space. It's you got everyday AI. So things that, like, if we want to order a cab or look at a movie, that's AI, right? So everyone is going to use AI. And look, banks traditionally, when they look at technology, they think about costs. Will this save us money or will this make us more compliant? But that's not going to give anyone competitive advantage, right? Because everyone will do that. That will become table stakes. Everyone will do that. And if you don't do it, in fact, you will be at a disadvantage. So I think there's no choice but to accept that you will have to use a certain level of AI in your business. The real trick is going to be who can use the creative side of generative AI to create new value propositions, new ways of engaging with customers, new ways of delivering experiences for customers. And I think probably the fintechs will be quicker onto this than the banks, because the banks will be risk adverse and they'll be looking at this sort of saying, oh, can we really do this? Whereas the fintechs will be sort of saying, well, what's the customer trying to do? And how can generative AI help us with that? And that's also going to be an interesting area for you if you think about all the non-banks that are now in financial services. Everything from retailers to telcos to you name it. But retailers are now selling products which have finance embedded in it. Now they are going to use generative AI to find ways of creatively engaging with customers and helping them have solutions to whatever it is they're trying to do in their life. Because banks tend to think in silos. Some of these new players are thinking about, well, what's the customer trying to do throughout their life, and how can we be there at that moment and make it so simple and just make it such a great experience that they'll go with us. So I think generative AI is going to be an interesting one. I think it's a real challenge because, look, I have no doubt, Ratcom, that generative AI is going to lead to conduct risk issues at scale, where someone does something and it's not about one rogue employee maybe impacting 50 customers. Someone's going to do something where actually millions of customers are impacted. And we're going to have scenarios where executives and boards are saying, we didn't realize the technology was doing that. So I think, for every bank and every fintech out there, the first thing they should do is understand the technology. What's its capability? And then understand, in the context of what we're trying to do for our customers, how can this help us? And then address the question of how can we do it in a way that we know it's driving the right outcomes, that it's fair, that it's got the bias removed from it, and that it's ethical. Because if you don't do these things, if you just grab technology and use technology for the sake of technology, well, you're running a big risk, because unless you happen to be a technology company, most of us are not in the business of technology. Technology is a tool that supports and enables the business, maybe accelerates our strategy, but it's not the reason we exist, and it's not the reason we transform.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Very insightful. What I picked up, what you said, uh, that somewhere 90% accuracy, that's not good for regulator as well as for customer. So it may be good in labs or whatever we do, and we make it 90 to 92%. But if I am a customer who is in the rest 10%, and if I don't get proper reply, for me it was better if a human was there and not a technology. So fantastic point I think you have made.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
and I think, Rackham, there's two other points. One is we should look at how this technology can support our people. So I'm more in the augmented intelligence. So if the technology can help our people, do better things for our customers and drive better outcomes, great. But the other thing I think, let's not be naive about this. Generative AI technology will be available on every smartphone in the world in the next 12 months because everyone is bringing out Gen AI. Apple will have it, Amazon will have it, everyone is going to have it. And if we don't think our employees are going to use their smartphones to answer questions that they're struggling with, I think we're naive. So I think we need to make sure that we're educating our people in terms of how to use the technology properly, and also that we are putting in place, ethical standards that, we say to people, look, you cannot put customer or, sensitive data belonging to the organization into a learning model. And we need to explain to people why, so that if they are going to use things or use technologies, that they're doing it in a way that they understand the consequences and we are comfortable that it is the right consequences, not something that, well, let's hope for the best.
Yeah, thanks. And yeah, technology is the enabler only. And I think what you rightly said, maybe in next few months, everybody will have some sort of AI in their pockets, in their phones. Yeah. And so like what is the value get delivered and how the customer experience can become better. So yeah, I think you are bang on. And I think this is our also understanding. Have you seen challenges with respect to our data? Of course, you have talked about the explainability part and the transparency and biases should not be there. But do you feel even banks are ready with their current data models? What are there? Because generative AI will require a lot of data for training.
Well, as long as I've been around, banks have been talking about the single view of the customer, and they still don't have it, right? So data is a huge problem because, look, banks are, they're set up around products and channels and all those type of things. They're not set up around customers. They might claim to be customer centric, but actually they're product and channel centric. There is huge issues with the data. I could be, Anthony, I could be Tony, I could be AT, I could be all those type of things, right? And there's no, coherent view of my relationship with the financial institution. And I guarantee you that, right? So if your data is not correct, right, how can you use, tools like artificial intelligence to interrogate that data and come up with something that is absolutely appropriate or customized to me? Because it's the data is incorrect to start with, right? So I think you hit a really interesting point, Radcom, in terms of, look, if you want to use these tools, yeah, great, let's understand what they can do. But let's get the basics right first. And those basics are around data. Get our data right so that we are comfortable that our data is going to lead to proper outcomes. And then put in the guardrails to make sure that we're going to use that data in a way that's fair to the customer and that's right and legal and compliant. Because without those things, I mean, you're now relying on a situation where you got patchy data that may be correct or may be incorrect, and you're going to make fundamental, decisions around customers. I think that's really a problematic area. And look, if you're starting off from scratch, wouldn't it be great because you wouldn't have those problems? You could build it from day one, but that's not where most institutions are starting from. And even fintechs, the fintechs that have been around for a couple of years, is their data the way they want it? I doubt it.
Yeah, the important point, Anthony, what you have highlighted, I will say even I have seen over the decades single view of customer. So that part is broken, is still not fully there. And as you rightly said, what our names are there in the bank, in the various departments, whether it is Tony or Raktim and it's Mr. Singh or Raktim alone, it makes a difference. So and for the artificial intelligence and generative AI require a proper data model. So yeah, I think we have to tread here cautions with caution. Though it looks good, and yeah, when Gen AI came, we all said wow, but the underlying data broken can be problem. Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
But on the positive side, though, Ratcom, if it forces financial institutions to get their data right, because isn't that going to be something that is worthwhile? So if it says, if boards and executives say, actually this is really interesting and it has great potential, but we need to get the basics in order, and we've been talking about this forever. But look, as you and I know, data is a mindset, right? Just because you invest in CRM systems or any sort of system, that doesn't mean you use data to think about how you drive decisions in the business, right? So I think if we can use this as an opportunity to sort of say, look, we're at a point of disruption where actually it's going to be exponential. AI and generative AI and whatever comes after it is actually going to accelerate that even more. So let's sort out the basics now, and let's make sure we have the guardrails in place at the same time.
I think important point, and it's maybe everybody should listen to what you said. First, get your data model and data corrected. I think that should be the starting point before jumping and just trying to deploy some foundation model in the bank. Absolutely right. I think this should be the starting point of get the data corrected, data models correct, the customer data is really cleaned, and of course we have to remove the biases and these things. So yeah, I think we have talked a lot about Gen AI. Let's pivot something else. The other business models which are there, banking as a service, the open banking. Your views on that? You have seen whether banks have really adopted, and what are the benefits coming out? Anything else you want to highlight here?
Well, look, open banking is one of these things that's been talked about for the last couple of years. In some parts of the world, so in Europe, it tends to be regulatory driven. The regulator says you must have open banking. To me, it's a bit like the turkeys voting for Christmas, because open banking is not in the interests of the incumbents. Why would it be? But they're being forced from a regulatory perspective to actually open up their systems, be able to connect so that data can be shared with other entities, be they banks or non-banks, so that customers can get better services. I don't think it's look, we haven't had the breakthroughs that we expected, and partly because I don't think it's in the interests of incumbents to actually make it work. Right? I think if I'm a fintech or a retailer, I can see loads of advantages in open banking because I have only upside. I have nothing to lose. So I think it's early days, but I think what we are seeing though is a shift towards embedded finance, where customers at the point of sale no longer need to think about getting finance because it's part and parcel of what they're buying. So you want to buy a sofa or a suit or whatever it is, you want to finance that over 3-4 payments. Why not? I don't have to think about it. In fact, I think the real challenge is, just how far should this be regulated? Because a lot of it is not regulated at this point in time, right? Which, the incumbents would rightly say, well, this is not fair because, these guys are given credit and they're not necessarily regulated. So I think what we need to make sure that is that embedded finance actually is in the customer's interests. I get worried when I see embedded finance for groceries, but we need to make sure that it is in the customer's interest. I think it then creates a pressure point for banks and fintechs to actually up their game, because if we're we used to describe it this way, Ratcom, if we're upstream waiting on the salmon, and these guys are down at the mouth of the estuary with the nets, right? So if the customer is able to do what they want in a seamless way at the point when they are looking to do something in their life, why wouldn't they? Right. So, and some parts of the world have had the emergence of the super apps where everything is in one app. That hasn't happened in the West. It's still very disaggregated. But embedded finance has had a big role to play in terms of how the market is changing. Now, that brings around banking as a service, because I think what we need to realize is this is no longer about just white labeling a product, right? This is about technology enablement at the point of sale, right? So it's not a case of, well, I'm bank A and you can call the product retailer C, right? No, this is around we will embed the technology in your front end and you can do things. And what we are starting to see is, some of the banks are now looking at the investment they've made in infrastructure. They're sort of saying, actually, we could leverage this infrastructure and make it available as a service, right? And equally, we have, fintech sort of saying, well, actually, we could just be the service. Now, I think the real challenge for banks here is, do they change the business model so that they are open and are integrated and they are part of the arena that customers live in, right? Or do they run the risk that they become a back-end utility? That when the customer decides, well, I must use the bank for this, right? Well, they're there to provide the infrastructure. And I think it's a real challenge. So, again, it comes back to the data. Do we understand our customers? Do we really have a single view of the customer? Do we, like Netflix, understand what the customer likes? Or like Amazon, can we sort of predict, actually, based on what they've done, we think the customer would also like to do this, right? Because that's when we start to see the banking model change, not based on what we're doing today, right? What we're doing today, in my mind, is a lot of tinkering around the edges, but it's not real customer centric, and it's not going to, it's not going to differentiate any bank at this point in time.
Yeah. So you rightly said tinkering around the edges. Yeah, I think that is what may be happening at the moment. And as a customer, I will also want that banking should be there when I'm buying something. That time behind the scene, banking should be there, and I should be able to spend and whatever I wanted to buy, wherever I wanted to buy, I should be able to do that. I think that is the main thing. And you rightly said that it may not be good for the incumbent banks because there is not much for them to do, but maybe it will help them in getting some more data points, or maybe force them, as you have taken example of some other companies, to really now understand what customer wants and understand the customer journey. So yeah, it's an important point, and I think the way COVID became a burning platform, many banks moved to the cloud or started their journey. I think now, because of this convergence of things which is coming out, it may force banks to really keep customer at the center of what they're doing and understand the customer journey. Yeah, important point. So let me come to now another point of overall transformation, and I will say digital transformation. Now, how you have seen the banks, whether they have really adapted, they have getting the benefit, or it's a journey, it will continue. But whether banks have really gone into that, or have you observed anything new into that? So yeah, your views.
Well, look, banks have been talking about digital transformation for the last 2 decades. It doesn't matter whether it's banking or any other industry, Rackham. Most institutions have failed with their digital transformation efforts, and I think the main reason they're failing is they're not setting out to transform. They're setting out to do technology initiatives, and I think what we really need to do is bank boards and executives need to stand back from this and make sense of where is this world going. Like what will our customers expect of us today, tomorrow, and into the future? And what does that say in terms of what type of organization we need to be if we're going to be competitive and relevant in that environment? I have a fundamental, challenge when I think about bank transformation. And the challenge is the P&L is driven by products and channels. And so I can go to any bank and I can pull out their annual report, or I can listen to their investor presentation, and they'll show me how they're doing on all these products. And they'll tell me how they're doing on all these channels. We had monolines in the past, so they were even better at doing that, right? We now have people, we have organizations that are really, in tune what customers need and are there on a preemptive basis to make it seamless, to create a great experience for the customers. I don't see banks in that space. I think banks look at digital transformation firstly as an opportunity to reduce costs, because they're looking at their cost income ratio and saying, oh, these neobanks and challenger banks and fintechs, they're doing it a lot cheaper. And in a lot of cases they are, right? So they're looking at it as a cost issue. They're looking at it as a compliance issue. But are they really looking at it as a transformation opportunity? And that's a piece I struggle with, in that I'm not sure they do. And I think that, banks, the bigger they are, the more sought out they are, the more, vested interests they are. It's hard to stand back and sort of say, actually, we want to really transform and become truly customer centric, not the sound bit or the sound bite. We want to be truly customer centric, and that means that we need to rethink this bank and we need to transform on that basis. Now, look, it's easy for someone like me to say that because I recognize banks have pressures from regulators and governments and whatnot saying, no, you can't do that, you can't close branches, you need to keep branches open for society and all those type of things. But I'm just wondering, is there a real appetite? And I think the way they're set up, the structure, the way they're focused on products and channels, I think holds them back. And I think for me, transformation is a mindset because you need to think differently about the business. If you think differently about the business, you will start to do things differently in the business, and that starts to change the culture. I don't believe the culture has changed to one of being a transformative, customer-centric environment. And I think there's a real challenge there.
Yeah, so very aptly you said that it's a technological change, or maybe the regulator is sourcing, and that's why they are doing something, but not really a change, which is doing the transformation and culture change. So Tony, now if you have to give advice to the banks from this platform, some 3 points if you want to give, what will be those 3 points? If you have talked of Gen AI, getting the data model corrected, getting the single view of customer, and of course the transformation. So if you want to summarize and tell which are the 3 or 5 points they should be adhering so that they can really become transformative.
Look, I think the first thing that we need to invest time in is making sense of the world. So we need to recognize that there's so much disruption, there's so much coming down. I mean, we haven't even touched on quantum computing and what that might do, right? But it's about making sense of the disruptive, digital, hyper-connected world we are in. Right? So we need to do that. We then need to look at it and sort of say, well, actually, the past doesn't help us, right? Because the past actually, in many respects, is irrelevant, right? Because the future is going to be totally different. And now what we need to figure out is, well, how can we get there? And we need to spend time on the how, not on the what, right? Because to my mind, too much time gets spent on the what. And the what can be pet projects or, whoever has the most influence or whatever is in the Harvard Business Review or whatever it might be. I think the entity needs to say, well, look, for us to be relevant and competitive in the future, this is how we need to transform. And then what we need to figure out is, how do we bring our people on that journey with us? Because, transformation is not a one-off event, nor is it a town hall meeting. Because, even if, it's a very compelling story, when the people leave the town hall meeting, the first thing they start thinking about is, what does this mean for me and my team and my department, etc. Right? So we need to create a vision for the future of what the entity might look like and how we're going to get there and what that means for our people and how our people are going to be part of that story. Because if they don't feel they're going to be part of the story, they will resist it, right? And consciously or unconsciously, they will block it, right? So we want them to be part of the story, and we want to invest in them so that they can actually help us deliver against our vision. So I think the big thing for me is, let's stop tinkering around the edges. Let's stop the incremental improvements. Let's work back from the future, figure out how we need to transform. Let's get our people on the bus with us, and then let's start doing it. And look, you're not going to do it in one go, but at least let's know where we're trying to get to. And of course, we will never get there because the world will keep changing. But directionally, we should be going in the right direction. Right? So I think there's the real challenge. And I think for me, one of the things for boards and executives is around developing that ability to independently make sense of the world so that they can help the organization make the optimal choices, because you're never going to get the best choice. And look, some of our assumptions will be wrong, some things will change in the market, which mean actually we need to adjust slightly or whatever. But let's make sure that we're developing the capabilities at board and senior level so that we can respond to disruption and that we can bring the organization forward and bring the people with it.
So I think you have very beautifully encapsulated the thing, and I believe many will be resonating of what you said. after leaving the town hall, everybody start checking what does it mean to me. Like there are some high things have been discussed, but what does it mean to me? And now, if I summarize what it means, of course, banks has to understand the customer journey. Again, the people are involved there. And similarly, if they have to do something internally, that their employees, they have to take care. And I think each and every employee should be part of that vision of, you said, why, how, what, and especially again, the how part become important. What you're planning to do is like, of course, those are other things are also important, but how you are doing. And yeah, the beautiful point of thinking independently, what you wanted to do and what is your view of the world and what your organization wanted to do. So yeah, I think it's a very insightful discussion. I think we all have got a lot of wisdom today. Thank you, Tony, for your time today. And thanks, viewer. We'll be coming out with some more episodes on the similar lines. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Ekam.